Hello and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. Chats on leadership, life and the lessons we learn, often the hard way. This week, we're talking about the great crossover between leadership and parenting. And I am joined by the delightful Charlie Lyons, an HR professional, coach and parent, to explore the wisdom that lives in the messy, beautiful overlap of raising humans and leading them. Whether it's bedtime negotiations or high-stakes meetings, there are skills we carry between the two worlds, sometimes consciously, sometimes not. So grab your cuppa, or maybe that half-drunk coffee you have reheated twice already, and join us for Being the Parent Leader. I'm very glad to see that I have already made you chuckle there, Madam Lyons. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for
What was
having
that?
me.
Was that the fact that you've got a reheated cup of coffee in front of you?
Yes, and witnessing the professionalism as a podcast host. Very
Oh my
impressive.
God. Don't be ridiculous. Bridget will kill me if she thinks I've started going professional on her when she's not here. Sorry, Bridge. Well, that certainly brought it back down to some layer. So anyway, this is the wonderful Charlie Lyons. I've said a very, very, very tiny little bit about you, but I would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the audience in any way that you would like.
Oh, thank you. Well, as you said, I'm Charlie. I am a parent. I'm a mum of two gorgeous, wonderful girls that keep me thoroughly on my toes. I am also a coach. I like to say I work with humans, mainly in the workplace, generally focused on supporting their well-being and their growth in leadership. I have a couple of arms to my work. One arm is kind of focused at the moment in the Marcoms industry. So I support leaders there. I work with a wonderful forward-thinking recruitment company who actually support leaders transitioning into their new roles. And as a
Oh,
coach,
nice.
I get to work with them in their probationary period. And then the other arm of my work is all focused around parents, parent leaders, working parents. And with a background in special needs, I work with parent carers too. So parents of children with additional needs or special needs. So, yeah, I would say that probably at the heart of it, my work is about bringing even more humanness to the way we parent and the way we lead.
And I'm sure that we might get into more of this, but just right at the front, please take the opportunity to say something about the podcast.
Ah, yes. So I too have a practice of podcasting like you, which is a new and delightful addition into my life. I podcast with the wonderful Lindsay, and
Hello, Lindsay.
we have a podcast that is called Made Possible by Parenthood. And so it is, for us, a refreshing kind of take on parenthood. It's more around what the parenting journey makes possible for us as human beings who happen to be parents. So we show up not as experts, but we show up as two human beings that really want to support other parents in reconnecting with the expert within themselves.
I love the fact as well, because not just me, but everyone that you have on that has somehow finally, maybe not in the midst thereof, but you are giving such an opportunity for parents to hear from parents about none of us have the first idea. I also maintain that anyone's written a sodding book on parenting had no idea before they actually wrote it. We're all muddling along beautifully in some way, shape or form. And I hope that that will come out in the conversation that we have. There is one more thing that I want to ask you about, though, so that people understand who Charlie Lyons really is. Because I have known you, oh my God, for over 10 years now. When we sat together learning to coach all that time ago, I think I might have said to you at the time, and I continue to think, that you were like sunshine sat next to me because you were always wearing bright orange. Do you remember that bright orange blanket that you, or whatever it was, that you had around you all of the time? I'm very upset that you're not wearing it today, actually. Well, there you go. Because whilst we can talk about our work, we often as we know, miss out who we are. So there is part of you that is Charlie Lyons, the orange cape wearer of sunshine fame in my world. So is there anything else about you as a person, as nutty as what I've just said about you, that you'd also want to say about you?
Oh, I am innately a country bumpkin. For my sins, I love him very much, but I married a Londoner, and we now, as a family, live and reside in London, which I also love. But my soul, I think, lives in North Wales, and my heart really definitely resides in places that are not so built up and not so city-like. So you'll often find me escaping and periodically running away from the city.
I now have a vision of you on
I
top somewhere with this big orange cape flying behind you, like some kind of pseudo Sound of Music moment, just feeling much better about yourself. But similarly, I come from the countryside. I love green. My husband loves water, and we travel quite a lot now that we're able to, because we're in a different stage of parenting. We're actually into grandparenting now as well. But I just quite like watching landscape TV.
yeah.
And whilst well, anyone listening to this podcast will also know I never stop talking, and you also know me as never stop talking. But landscape TV, my husband has found, can actually shut me up. He gets quite unnerved by it. But he's like, "You all right? You haven't said anything for however long." I'm like, "I'm fine, be quiet."
Oh,
Anyway, we digress, but hopefully the audience now knows a little bit more about Charlie Lyons before we dig into this. So let's start with your story about how you've now arrived in this working with parents, being the coach. I'm not suggesting that you're niche in any way, shape, or form, but you have definitely come to coaching with a particular focus in mind for one arm of yours anyway, and that's the arm, whichever arm that might be, left or right. But that's the arm that we're here to talk about today. Can you tell me a little bit about how that has evolved for you?
yes, and let me try to be concise without
Oh, you don't have to be
rambling on.
concise. We don't do any of that here. It'll be fine.
Well, I mean, I think it feels so important to say and kind of refer to when we met, because my eldest was 6 months old then, and I embarked on kind of training to be a coach. So I think there was something so deeply important, pivotal, and kind of transformational for me that I was learning that whilst in the early phases of parenthood.
Hmm.
So, therefore, the experience of parenthood made a lot possible for me, and also kind of brought much challenge and much kind of questioning. I suppose, before my eldest was born, I was a typical leader. I was head of a department, I was responsible for people. I was responsible for, training and development in the organization. I was on the senior leadership team, and I was writing and delivering leadership programs. So in a way, before I became a parent, I kind of lived and breathed it. I, looked at all the models, all the tools. I mean, it really was something I loved, I was fascinated by. And it was also something that was supporting me at the time because I had, by that point, already been burnt out by being gifted a leadership role too soon
Mm.
with not enough capacity and ability. And then I had a child, and then, there was some kind of shift, but actually things were carrying on as they were before. I was still leading, I was still a leader. And then I had my second child, and wham bam, all of a sudden things didn't work the same.
Sounds a little bit like the Eurovision Song Contest song, "What the hell just happened?"
Absolutely. Yeah. And some of it I could see coming. So I was already preparing for it in some way, professionally, with where I wanted to go, the kind of work I wanted to do. But at the same time, it entirely fell apart. Some of the burnout returned. And I think that I just really questioned everything. And when it came to leadership, I was questioning, do I even want to do this anymore?
Mm.
Who am I leading? Feeling torn between leading and parenting, and just not knowing what to do with that. And also feeling that they were, in a way, entirely separate entities in my life that I was trying to bring together in a way, and I wasn't finding a way that worked for me or seemed to be anybody else around me. Yeah.
It's so interesting because, again, for the purpose of the recording, the way that Charlie and I know each other is through our work and our learning around integral development, integral coaching. And I think that that is so interesting in what you're saying about the word integration. And I'm wondering if you've got anything that you'd able to be talking about, but from your first experience of it, when literally, not so literally now, 6 months old, versus being pregnant a second time, because you were right in the midst of learning integral development and how that seemed to be together. And yet, with all of our learning, and this is just proof, isn't it, right? That we can do all the training, all the learning, all the development. We don't always have our shit together forever, even when you've got like that level of embodiment, that level of learning, that there can be moments where the integration falls away. I'm just wondering if you've got anything where, what was that like first time to second time to be able to then distinguish that your integration was awry?
Yeah. Yeah, lovely. And the first thing I want to say, just to what you were saying about, none of us ever have our kind of shit together, no matter what you've done or when you've done it, we all still have the condition of being human.
Absolutely.
So that continues to always be present
Forever.
forever. Absolutely.
Yes.
But when you were asking me that question, what was coming up for me was, first of all, my system got bigger. There was something, 3 was then 4.
Mm.
And there was something more obvious, tangible, bigger. The system itself had grown. And that, I think, was one of the things that impacted that integration. And then the second thing was, you know, my state and my response to all of that, with lack of sleep, with increased expectation and pressure, I was then in a state of survival.
Mm.
So my resources and my capacity to hold that level of integration was frankly not present.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we're looking at the sameness rather than difference, I guess, between parenting and leadership, that is so interesting with the word system, because we've talked on other episodes. And I'm a firm believer that when somebody new arrives in a system, everybody needs to be re-onboarded. And yet what tends to happen in an organization is that the new bod comes along and here's your induction program and find out about this and find about that. And everybody else thinks that they can bloody well stay the same. And then you're like, oh, this doesn't seem to be working very well now. No, because there's got to be that new, and yet if I then think, and again, I am spitballing now, I haven't really got, this is like a half-baked theory of my own. But if I think about what you've just said there, a new baby doesn't get to be the person with the induction program to sort it out for themselves. The parents are the people doing that. And yet, because of what you're saying, they are often the people who don't always have the capacity to be re-onboarding everybody. And equally, they end up leaving themselves out because they're so busy focusing on the newborn. So, I mean, it makes sense to me that you always got to wait it out, but know know that that's actually occurring. It's
Yeah.
back to the level of discomfort, and not everything can be fixed straight at once. And that's the same for a new team being formed as
Yeah.
the same as it's a new family team being
Yeah.
formed.
And I love that you mention that, because I often kind of refer back to and remember kind of Tuckman's stages of like team development. And I often share that with parents in their early
Yeah.
phases, because it's as if we kind of forget that our system is going to go through phases until our system is formed, until it is a unit. And I feel like there's something we forget about that. And I think it would give us all probably, and it certainly gave me a certain element of relief when I thought, oh, okay,
This is
we're
normal.
only at this phase. Like, it's not going to look good here. Nobody knows each other yet. We haven't got a clue what we're doing. Nobody knows their roles. We're not really sure what this unit is, who it is, why we're here, what's important to us. So no wonder it would be, and forgive me, I'm going to get it wrong if I remember the first two. I can't remember which order they're in, storming and forming, and
Yeah. Forming, storming, norming, performing.
that's it. Yeah.
But I agree with you. This is where my Menno brain goes now, because I was going to say something really life affirming about that. What the hell was I going to say? Oh, I know what it was. Because I remember when I had Ella, our youngest, that I wanted it to be like the book. And so I would read the book, because it's interesting for me. Whilst there was a real evolution in terms of my leadership journey whilst I was in the military, it was quite rigid, because that was the way that it actually was. And then I'd come out into a corporate environment and got pregnant at the same time. So I was learning to be a manager and a leader in an organization and trying to do it by the book, because I wasn't into what I'd learnt for the previous 9 years beforehand. And of course, then I had no compass bearing on having had a baby. I'd got stepchildren, which I was still learning how to work, like some kind of small equipment. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean it quite like that. But so I went to the book. And of course, then it wasn't by the book, because there was no level. I'm always thinking of the Lencioni model now, because I wasn't trusting myself, let alone anybody else, with quite how that was working. So the manual didn't work at work, and the manual wasn't working at home. And I think that in both, from a leadership perspective in work, and then that parent leader that we're talking about, that learning to have the confidence and trust of, you just got to be in it and learning and trusting the process almost, because the book isn't going to do it. Ash took all the books off me, and that was probably the wisest thing that he could do, because you then had to start listening to self and looking at everybody in the system as to how that was all working, but starting with self. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and it's interesting you saying that, because Lindsay and I often say, put your books away. And now there's even more books. And now we've got online content. And now we've got experts.
Oh my
And
God,
now we've
yes.
got this and we've got that. And it's so noisy out there in the parenting space that I think this stifles our own inner power as parents even more. And then if you think you're a leader at that same time, trying to, navigate and step into your own power there too, just think how the interplay of these two things is impacting you in both places.
Yeah. And that narrative of I appear to be failing on all fronts, when in actual fact, there's like, you are learning on
Yeah.
all fronts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, when you're in your probationary period, it's almost when it's named, we kind of know that, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to have any of the answers now. I haven't signed my contract yet, and I'm going to show up to it in this way, and I'm going to ask lots of questions and things like that. But it's funny, I'm not sure we do that with parenthood. We feel we can do that with parenthood.
No, and I'm very interested, and I know that I didn't quite put this down on any of the questions that I said, oh, we could talk about this, but you knew I might lob something in and be like, oh, here she goes. I promise you it's not going to be biophysics that I threatened you with beforehand.
All right.
But it's that I am really interested in that whole intergenerational conversation thing, and quite how powerful it is when you get those sort of relationships right. I strongly believe, and I can see that happening in my own family, but then trying to put that back into whatever I do in work as well, because we're at work a long time now. And, here I am veering. Well, my family keep telling me I'm nearly 60. Can they stop that, please? Because I'm only going to be 56 this year. So I have got a little bit longer. But we're heading into a new decade soon enough. And I feel that, and I see that when I am now at work with people, some of whom are, with places that I've been in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and then, 60s and 70s. So that whole element, and that for me is so important, both at work and in the family dynamic. So for you in your leadership journey, I mean, we are now at secondary school, right? For where you are in that sort of like element with where you are with parenting. But whilst we can be in that mode of, right, I've got it taped now, they're out of nappies, they've started walking, but as soon as you think you've got it taped, something else happens.
Of course.
And so I think, from how are you at with your leadership training, both in the workplace and in the family, with that constant evolution? What are the similarities that you would share there?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I think that's kind of one of the things that I have learned, it is really just to kind of surrender to that. I think that you can have, so let me come at it from this point of view. Balance is an absolute word I despise in the parenting arena.
Yes, I agree.
I also despise it when it's said in work-life balance. So, I come from the standpoint now more of kind of supporting myself to hold the flux.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm always aware there's flux in leadership and in my work. And I'm always aware that there's flux in my parenthood experience. And if I ever reach those moments where there feels like perfect balance, I know it's only momentary, because that is what the definition of balance is. It's for a split second. So I don't aim for that anymore. I don't aspire for that. I don't even sign up for that narrative whatsoever. Shoved it in the bin a long time ago, and thoroughly encourage and profane from the rooftops for other parents to do the same, if I'm honest. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Well, it does. It's sort of like slight further, because I think that where we've talked about, and again, I certainly don't want to sort of like be trying to give everyone a full education on integral development within this this episode, but we have often talked with the learning that we've had. And I think that it's come up with some of the stories that you've said already, that there can be that moment in a system, be it in family or at work, where the team, for want of a better word, is in immediate concerns. And so it's what is needed absolutely right there in that minute. And of course, the one after that, in terms of the way that it's labelled, for want of a better word, is balance. So this is the way I've always seen it, in the way that we've learning, is balance is like a transition. That you're seeing what's happening over here that has previously been working, be it in the team or what you've learned about the new baby in the system or whatever it might be. But it is a transition thing that is best placed if you can get into conversation, if you can be in relationship, if you can be asking each other questions about how is this. So, conversations with your partner, or how you communicate with a baby or whatever when they're not able to say it hurts here, or whatever it might be. And again, that changes so often as you're going through the different ages, because they'll then talk to you non-stop, and then they'll slam themselves up into a room and won't talk to you for days on end. Oh God, now I don't know what's going on. But, I'd say that quite flippantly, but that level of conversation, because I think that there's that element. And the other thing that I was thinking about that I wonder, but you may want to say something on what I've just said there, but the other word that springs to mind for me as well is capacity. And when balance is an illusion, what are the things that you have done, both as a leader and as a parent, when that system is evolving, to be somebody creating more capacity for yourself and potentially for others?
Love that question. What a fundamental question for, kind of any parent leader, especially as we are living in a world where burnout rates are high, where, leaders are burning out, parents are burning out. I think the stats are 9 in 10 parents are
Oh,
experiencing
blimey.
burnout. So, this is real and this is live. And the first thing I would say, and I always say this slowly because it's so important, is really recognizing that you are at capacity, first of all. It is a powerful and fundamental first step to say, I am at capacity. I no longer can manage in the way things currently are. I often like to kind of reframe it for people because overwhelm has a really bad rap
Mm,
as an emotion. No one really likes to feel it. Often we can have stories that it means like we're failing. But if we didn't experience overwhelm, we wouldn't know we were burning out.
right.
So
Mm,
overwhelm is a signal, it's a sign. And I love the definition of it, that it's overwhelm is when things are unfolding around us faster than our sensory system can handle. And so we've got to listen to that sign. We've got to respond to that, first of all. So, yeah, that feels like the first kind of most powerful and fundamental thing. And
mm,
then I think then the conversation's all around energy management. And I think there's lots of that I've learned in that, and the hard way. I hasten to add. I, I know I do not want to give the impression here that this has been easeful. But yeah, I think, understanding more about me and my natural rhythms, and actually being okay with them, not comparing them to anybody else's, not feeling I should have more energy, less energy, more capacity, or anything like that. Being able to kind of regularly tune in to my own fuel bank. What is it today? What does that tell me? What do I need? Is it this? Is it that? Am I on empty? Am I on fuel full? And also, I'm a firm believer as a working parent in micro moments. I
mm,
think they can be incredibly resourcing, incredibly supportive, and that, we can cultivate them in our life and work, so we can support ourselves to have the amount of capacity that's right for us, whatever that might be.
mm. Eh, We talked before we started recording, and I'm going to bring this in because I think it sort of like maps very nicely with what you've just said. Anyone listening to this right now may well believe that Charlie is a really lovely, chilled out person running around in an orange cape, as we have already said, and wouldn't be somebody that you would find being incredibly controlling any time of the day. Whereas with me, you'd think I would lead with controlling and have left my cape at home.
Are you
But
outing
we
me?
were but we were having the conversation that there is this part of you that really wants to control. And of course, what both of us, I think, in different ways have found out that the more you try to control, the less capacity you've actually got, right? This delightful thing that you're talking about with micro moments, yeah, you can get your mitts around that. So thank you very much. I'll have some of that. There's that element to it. And I'm also interested when Charlie Lyons has turned up, with quite how that has played out in trying to hit the override button on overwhelm. And whether you could say anything about it. I may well be making that up, but I'm just wondering if that has been the case. Because again, we want to know when we're at overwhelm. And yet my feeling is, especially when you're saying 9 times out of 10, that I think that people hold a real narrative like, I've got no choice.
Mm-hmm.
So they try to push the override button.
Yeah. Oh, I've certainly done that. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that make sense?
Done that. Yeah. And I don't know if this answers your question, but I think one of the things that parenthood has gifted me, which I feel now I've been able to bring to my own leadership journey and my own leadership experience, is around my emotions and kind of not controlling them, or knowing that there's data in them, even the ones that I really dislike, even the ones that make my body cringe and contort. And particularly in parenthood, we might say, guilt would form one of those.
Yeah.
Even those have data for me. And when I stop trying to control them or push them down or not have them, then at that point, I can often perhaps hear the wisdom in time, not necessarily straight away, that they're trying to offer me.
And I think that's beautiful, because that then says what you're ensuring within your capacity bucket, or whatever container you actually decide to use. There is reflection. And I think I'm just wondering if there's anything there to say around, how does reflection work for you as a parent leader, which aligns with the sort of reflection that we really hope for in leaders at work, which I don't always see enough of, because they're rushing on to the next thing. And we know that in a parent system or a family system that you can't do that. You can't rush through. God help us that we could rush through teenage years, but you don't. So how do you place reflection as an important part for you, but as an important part of the system?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It's fundamental to leadership, isn't it? And parenthood. And I think it has to be inherent. It has to be regular. I'm noticing my language now. I'm saying it has to be.
The controller's arrived. I knew I'd get her eventually.
It goes hand in hand to me with like self-awareness.
Yeah.
Two parts of the same coin. And I think it's, can we show up with that curious nature regularly, wondering, oh, what's happening here? Is this my agenda or their agenda? Am I trying to control something here? I mean, I ask myself that a lot. For what purpose? What's important here?
Yeah, I remember us all that time ago sat next to each other. I really fought against the whole self-awareness piece. Was just horrific for me when it first started. I was like, oh God, no, please don't make me go there. And, oh, you want me to be curious? No, I don't want any answers here. I'm just wondering, because I think what I'm hearing in all of that, and the question is, how much can we learn to be self-aware? How much can we learn to be reflective? And I believe that you and I are examples of those who have learnt more about it. And I'm just wondering, for you, was it a tussle? Did you enjoy those sort of like elements? Because of course, here we are now, both in a position where we are supporting others to learn something of the same. Because whilst many things from a parent leadership perspective are not easeful, and that was your word, they are much more easeful with those elements in play in the system.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like yes and no to me still today, right? I mean, I'm still learning to be in relationship with myself. I'm still learning things in in everyday moments that some feel revelatory and, oh gosh, yes, I'm so glad that was illuminated to me. And other things are like, oh gosh, yes,
I did
I
not
did
want to
that.
know that.
Yes. Ouch. Ouch. You know, in fact, Lindsay and I often say, when we talk about guilt, there is the value and the data is often in feeling the ouch.
Mm,
Same when it comes to kind of self-awareness and reflection. When we're a leader, it's often about feeling the ouch in that interaction with a staff member, or feeling the ouch of that dialogue in that team meeting.
I love the question as well, which is around, is it serving me? Is it serving you? And that's the curiosity bit, isn't it? That if we perpetually show up the same way and things are all okay, well, that's good. And then there is the ouch moment, and it may well be that that's when actually this isn't serving, but it's catching it in that moment and not pressing override again, going, oh, it'll be all right, and then carrying on, and then wondering why you get the same outcome. And I think that that's again the same if you're talking about a family system than if you're talking about in the teams. And I guess that's where the learning and the building of the space for other people in the system to know when showing up the same way isn't serving them or the rest of the family system, which is quite tricky when you're trying to teach children that, right?
Yeah.
Or show them the way.
Yeah. Or role model.
Or role model, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess that, when we talked on your show, I have changed in terms of what I am modeling many times over the years, that I have been parenting in the different guises that I have been as a parent, because there was so much to learn about me and continue to learn about me. And I think that's what you're saying for yourself as well, that just, there is the ebb and flow for all of you in the system as to how that actually all pans out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's all relational. I mean, leadership fundamentally at its core, I think, is relational,
Yeah,
same as parenthood, you know. So, these two things are not separate and actually can beautifully inform one another and
yeah,
serve one another if we let them, and also if we have the spaces where the permission is given for that to be the case.
absolutely. And in that space, are there any things that you are able to share that you have learnt from your children that you now apply within your leadership style?
Yeah, great question. The first one, and I can feel the discomfort as I even say it, is owning my mistakes. Like, really owning my mistakes, because they happen all the time. And they also happen all the time as a leader and a business owner, and so I think that that's a fundamental one. Kind of taking responsibility. I think when I initially thought about parenthood, I saw taking responsibility as, taking care of, organizing things. Yeah, I reckon I'd be pretty good at that level of taking responsibility. But actually taking responsibility in those really tricky moments for my reaction, for how I came across, for what I said, what I suggested, the decision I made, all of those things, that feels like something fundamental that parenthood has taught me, that I also know deep in my bones is fundamentally important in leadership too, which I,
Mm,
kind of now take into being a leader. And I think we've said it already about it being relational, but therefore, I wonder, before I was a parent, how much attention I paid to ruptures that happened.
mm,
And I think now as a parent, I notice them more, maybe because they're more painful, they're more personal, they're more felt. So I hope and I aim to pay more attention to those kind of relational ruptures that happen in a workspace, in a leadership space, and repair those and consciously tend to those and repair those.
Yeah, I love that. It puts me back to the capacity element and what we feel that we have. It's like I'm learning from my nieces and my grandson. I feel I have much more space for than I potentially did for our own children at the time. There's something very different from that relational element, a bit about being an aunt and a grandparent than being a parent. And I'll often sort of like feel a little bit woeful that I perhaps didn't feel like I had the space or the capacity. I am told on numerous occasions to get over myself, and it's a bit too late now, and they're not going to stick me in a nursing home or whatever it might be, or leave me by myself, for something terrible I did as a parent. I'm quite relieved about that. That's quite good. But there is something very different about that. But nothing needs to be the rush that we really believe it needs to be it in the parenting system or be it in the work system. And often we're doing more harm than good if we try to rush those sort of like elements.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I kind of wholeheartedly agree. I think the magic really happens when we slow down on all levels, slow down our thinking, slow down our feeling, slow down our movement, slow down our observation. And if I could just add one more thing that
Do it.
I feel like I've learned is that I've learned that my emotions matter, and I wholeheartedly take that into leadership now, and I don't think I did before. And I really support leaders to do the same too. I think obviously the territory is changing now with around emotional intelligence and agility and discernment and things like that. So the leadership space is changing. But I think parenthood really taught me actually the fundamental guide that my emotions were and are. And when I can build my attunement to them, wow, they are a
For sure.
powerful leadership skill.
For sure. And I think that the learning that I love to be involved in and wish for more of is supporting leaders in that we're going to be doing. Thank you so much for the very beautiful segue, because we will be doing an episode later on in the series which is about bringing your emotions to work, that being the whole self, being wholly unapologetically you. And we need to get into that. About that is not necessarily asking people to come and air all of their dirty laundry or how they're feeling, but how we can support leaders to articulate what it is that they're feeling, how they actually are, what the overriding emotion actually is, without that being seen as something like, oh God, get them, or whatever it might be, because it's integral. We're back to that word, that you can't leave all of that or slam a lid on it. It's part and parcel of how we all lead, whether it's something that we're very attuned to or feel unwholly uncomfortable in, but it's there whether we all like it or not.
Yeah, agreed.
And because my next question, one of the final questions, I cannot believe that we've already chased through all of this time. I could sit here and talk to you for more hours, but I will be in a lot of trouble with Bridget. Again, she gets so mad with me because I always overrun. Sorry, not sorry. Because I was going to say to you, if there was one sentence of encouragement to someone who is juggling nappies, Zoom calls, teen angst, whatever it might be, is there anything else life affirming from Charlie Lyons that you would like to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps some of it I've kind of said already, but lovely to clarify. If you're in the beginning stages or the early stages of parenthood, surrender to being a beginner and being in your probationary period. It's so okay to be a learner and to not know, and that will really kind of take some time. I feel I'd definitely have wanted to kind of hear that for myself. And what always feels fundamental to me is just kind of celebrate your uniqueness. It's your family, your flavour of family. If you're in the early phases, you won't even know yet what that is, and have joy and fun discovering that. But also remember that you're the expert in that and no one else can tell you how to do it. So find your version of how working and living can mesh and mix together. And that's totally okay.
Love that. Love that. I'd love to give you the last word, but I'm not going to, because I get to say a quote at the end of all of our episodes. Sorry.
Not
So, sorry, not sorry. Again, spend my whole life pretending to say sorry, but there we go. So the quote I have, and I think it absolutely aligns to the Charlie Lyons version that we've just heard as well, which is, there is no way to be a perfect parent and a million ways to be a good one.
Mm.
And perhaps we could say the same about leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I have loved talking to you, and I'm so glad that I have had the opportunity to have you here on the podcast with, I say us, because Bridget is always here, even when she's not, and vice versa. So she will thoroughly enjoy listening to this episode, and I have thoroughly enjoyed being here with you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you too. Me too. Thanks, Bobby. What a joy.
Take care. Thanks so much for listening. As always, you'll find resources and links over on our website and Spotify page, where you can dig deeper into today's themes whenever it suits you. Next week, we're stepping into another different kind of leadership conversation, one that's all about cycles. Not just the moon, though she is going to get a nod, but the many rhythms we can tune into to lead with for more energy, sustainability, and presence. I'll be joined by Samantha Garston, aka the Period Princess, to explore what it means to lead in sync with natural cycles, monthly, seasonal, emotional, and energetic. In a world that prizes constant hustle, we're asking what becomes possible when we honour rise and rest, bloom and retreat. Join us next time for Being Moonlit, and discover how cyclical thinking can be both deeply personal and powerfully strategic.